Let's get to the news. And I've got to say, it's very important when people hear this story that they don't minimize it to one comedian. They don't minimize it to one show. They don't minimize it to Jimmy Kimmel. Whether you've ever seen Jimmy Kimmel or not, Americans understand how important it is that Republicans, actually, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, teamed up with Maria Cantwell and other Democrats on the relevant committees, teamed up with Hollywood stars, teamed up with a lot of people in Middle America and on the coast to say, wait a second. It doesn't matter whether we like what he said or not. We don't have the FCC chairman talking like a mob boss, as Ted Cruz said, and then ABC freaking out and yanking him off the air. So yesterday, some heartening news for a lot of people.
Yep, Jimmy Kimmel Live will be back on the ABC airwaves tonight. This comes nearly 1 week after the network suspended the late night show amid threats of regulatory action from the FCC chair over Kimmel's comments about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Disney, which owns ABC, announced the return in a statement yesterday, writing, quote, "Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It is a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday. Some households, however, may still not see the show. Sinclair, which operates more than 30 ABC affiliates across the U.S., says it will carry news programming instead of Kimmel's return. But discussions with ABC are ongoing. Nexstar, the other major ABC affiliate owner that preempted the talk show last week, has not yet said what it plans to do. This reversal from ABC comes after days of pushback from protesters, politicians, and performers. Yesterday, just before the announcement, more than 400 celebrities signed a letter saying this is a dark moment for freedom of speech in our nation. That list includes actor Pedro Pascal on the same day the trailer was released for next year's Mandalorian movie, a spin-off of the major hit Disney Plus show that stars Pascal. Several Republican lawmakers also spoke out against the FCC's pressure on ABC. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky called it absolutely inappropriate. And Senator Ted Cruz of Texas said it was dangerous as hell. Joe, I think it was an important moment to be hearing from top Republicans like Ted Cruz and from all other sectors, shock and also concern about freedom of speech being tamped down.
Well, and what Republicans did, what some Republicans did seem to understand, Ted Cruz certainly understood it, that yes, right now this is being used against speech that Republicans don't like. But Willie, Republicans aren't going to be in the White House forever. So they understood. Ted Cruz warned about it. Others warned about it. What we're doing to them right now, they will do to us when a Democrat. This is short-sighted. It makes no sense. And then one of the reasons we saw the abrupt changes. But the one thing, again, that must be underlined, every company that we're talking about that is still thinking about pulling back, fine. Rand Paul was right on Sunday. If you're doing that because your audience doesn't want it or you find the content offensive and you think it'll chase off advertisers, that's your business decision. But the one bell that can never be unrung, as my constitutional lawyer at the University of Florida always would like to say, the one bell that can never be unrung was that Brendan Carr stepped into the fray before the suspension and therefore has colored everything negatively for these companies that want the Trump administration to approve their merger.
Yeah, it was explicit. If you don't have to speculate about whether there was government pressure at work here, we saw it happening. And you're right. I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised to see Senator Ted Cruz in particular step up and say, hang on a second. This isn't about whether you like Jimmy Kimmel, whether you even know who Jimmy Kimmel is, whether you found the comment he made last week distasteful, as many people did. This is about the government not having control over free speech. This is about standing up against the things we fought against for so long as conservatives, he would say, which is cancel culture, defending free speech, all of those things, the weaponization of government. Ted Cruz was a really important voice in all this. And you mentioned Brendan Carr. He's the FCC chairman, now going back and attempting at least to clarify his comments about Jimmy Kimmel, denying he threatened to revoke the broadcast license of ABC affiliates unless the network fired Jimmy Kimmel. Here's what Carr said last week, followed by his explanation yesterday.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, you know, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. A very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you know, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, you know, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
A lot of Democrats out there that are engaged in a campaign of projection and distortion. And distortion is they're completely misrepresenting the work of the FCC and what we've been doing. I saw there was a letter from some Senate Democrats that said the FCC threatened to revoke the license of Disney and ABC if they didn't fire Jimmy Kimmel, and that did not happen in any way, shape, or form. And what I spoke about last week was that when concerns are raised about news distortion, there's an easy way for parties to address that and work that out. And in the main, that takes place between local television stations that are licensed by the FCC and what we call national programmers like Disney. They work that out, and there doesn't need to be any involvement of the FCC. Now, if they don't, there's a way that's not as easy, which is someone can file a complaint at the FCC, and then the FCC, by law, that's set up by Congress, has to adjudicate that complaint. And what I've been very clear in the context of the Kimmel episode is the FCC, and myself in particular, have expressed no view on the ultimate merits had something like that been filed.
You know, Jim Rutenberg, we all say stupid things. Not you, of course, you're perfect. I say stupid things all the time. So, you know, if Brendan Carr just said that on a podcast, yeah, I don't think it's still funded by Russia, directly or indirectly. But wasn't Benny Johnson one of the guys that was ensnarled in that funding of Russian money?
I would have to go back and look at my story on it, but yes, I believe so. That was one of the names that we and others had mentioned.
Yeah, I think it was. So anyway, if that had just happened on his show, that would have been one thing. And we could have all said, okay, well, you know what? He got excited in the moment. He misspoke. The problem with Brendan Carr's explanation yesterday is, Jim, hasn't he made at least muted or direct threats towards people in the center left before who might have said things that were offensive to President Trump? And hasn't he threatened before to take action against broadcasters in a way that I don't remember any recent FCC chair doing?
I got to tell you, Joe, I've been following, sorry to admit this, FCC policy and speech for a couple decades. And
what a misspent youth, Jim. What a misspent youth. But what have you found?
But you just do not see FCC chairman throwing around talk about licenses. I mean, look at last week. The word station, the idea of a station license, which most Americans don't even remember that stations are licensed, it came up an awful lot. I mean, he went on to Hannity and was talking about that we have public interest obligations for broadcasters. They have licenses. If they don't like it, they can hand in their licenses. I mean, there's a lot of talk about licenses, not to mention President Trump coming in and saying more directly, maybe people should lose licenses. So if you're in the television business and the chairman is talking about certain legal public interest obligations for broadcasters, not for cable, I think your audience knows this, You're in television, you know what that means, and everyone knows what that means. So whether it's implicit, if it was a misunderstanding of what he said, then now he's clarified it. There were a lot of calls made to him by lots of reporters last week. Would love to interview him. But so now he's walking that back. Okay, but the word license has a meaning, and a meaning that can be very scary for people in the television business.
And Jim, his suggestion that this discussion about broadcast license was invented by Democrats or by the media somehow just isn't true. President Trump himself talks about it all the time. He writes about it in social media posts that these people are unfair to me. They're mean to me. I don't like them. So maybe they should have their licenses revoked. And obviously he and the FCC chair have talked about these things. So when he talked last week, Brendan Carr, he said this will be decided by market forces, meaning if the audience doesn't like what Jimmy Kimmel says and does, they will turn off the TV, they will stop watching, and that'll be up to Disney to decide. Disney has decided to put Kimmel back on the air tonight, but that's not the tact that the FCC and the Trump administration were taking just a few days ago. It was all downward pressure to try to get him off the air.
Definitely, and that's in the mix. And it's interesting because we haven't seen ABC really come forward and address this. I do want to note we've sort of been here before. Bill Maher talked about it on his show last week and Bob Iger, who's at the top of Disney now, was high up at Disney then. But when Bill Maher said some controversial things in 2001, the White House at the time weighed in. This is inappropriate. There wasn't an FCC discussion of licenses, and ABC with Bob Iger up there at Disney did ultimately cancel Bill Maher's show. So we have been here before, but it's rare. And this really you really have to go back to Nixon to get into this talk about station licenses.
Elizabeth B. Miller, your thoughts on this? What questions comes to mind? Of course, the president has mentioned news networks and even reporters in his sites.
Well, the whole when Mr. Carr was sort of dissembling yesterday and taking back his comments from last week, let's not forget that Donald Trump, on the heels of his threat, was saying, Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers are next, and he was celebrating. So if he feels he wasn't if we don't think he was direct enough, the president made quite clear where he stood, which is anybody who criticizes him deserves to get off the air. And it's very scary. I think what's interesting is how much pressure ABC got from its own community, from Hollywood. There were 400 signatures of those very well-known actors along, it was supporting the ACLU. There was a huge outcry from the unions, huge outcry from the mainstream media like us. So I think that they could succumb to pressure, too, of big forces from the other side.